Cuba will present at the United Nations General Assembly the demand to put an end to the unilateral blockade and also the coercive measures imposed by the United States against the Caribbean island. Argentina has reached an agreement with the Paris Club of creditor countries to avoid defaulting on a loan repayment in July, while unlocking temporary relief of some $2 billion. The United States government has seized control of 2 Iranian state news websites as part of its sanctions policy. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your host, Gladys Quesada. And Cuba will present this Wednesday at the United Nations General Assembly the demand to put an end to the unilateral blockade and also the coercive measures imposed by the United States against the Caribbean island. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez will be in charge of presenting the report before the multilateral body on the effects of the blockade against the Cuban people covering the period between April 2019 and March 2020. Washington has systematically ignored the request of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres for the lifting of all unilateral coercive measures applied against several nations. According to the Cuban Foreign Minister, the blockade has intensified in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, hindering access to medicines, supplies, and equipment to address the current health crisis. Cuba's ambassador to the United Nations, Pedro Luis Pedroso, pointed out that the report on the effects of the blockade shows that the U.S. siege is the main reason why the island is unable to materialize its plans for sustainable development and also to complete achievement of the 2030 agenda. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Venezuelan counterpart Jorge Arreaza evaluated bilateral relations and other issues of joint cooperation, including the response to COVID-19 this Tuesday. Meeting in Moscow, both officials addressed a wide range of bilateral cooperation issues in the commercial, economic, scientific, technical, and also humanitarian spheres, paying special attention to cooperation in the fight against the coronavirus. They also discussed the situation in the South American country, current issues on the global agenda, and mutual ties within the framework of the United Nations and other international organizations and platforms. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov praised the excellent bilateral relations between the two countries and the contracts signed to maintain cooperation in different areas.
Again, congratulate our Venezuelan friends with the 200th anniversary since the Battle of Carabobo, which is the battle that resulted in Venezuela's independence. Also, last year we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation between Russia and Venezuela, which established friendly and warm ties between the two countries based on mutual respect and sympathy. And Venezuela was the first country in the Western Hemisphere to register Russia's Sputnik V vaccine and establish regular deliveries from Russia to Venezuela. A contract has been signed between Venezuela and the producers of another Russian vaccine, Apivac Corona. We also have ties between our healthcare and pharmaceuticals companies. For example, we have deliver insulin and other medications to Venezuela.
In the meantime, his Venezuelan counterpart, Jorge Arreaza, also recalled the long-standing relations between both nations and the importance of protecting and supporting the United Nations Charter through democratic means.
262 signed agreements, 48 agreements are underway, under works, and this year we have 14th meeting of intergovernmental interdepartmental committees between our countries, and we are going to have a 15th meeting soon. We call for integration in all areas: economy, military, technical cooperation, cultural cooperation, cooperation in education, in finance, and so on. And we are really proud for our long-standing relations. Russia and Venezuela support the establishment of the group that will protect the UN Charter. This very document, this is the tool that we all have at our disposal. And as one of the very first Secretary General of the UN, a Norwegian said, when the UN organization was established, it wasn't established to bring the humanity to paradise, but to divert it away from the hell. And the main goals, main values of mankind are stipulated, enshrined in this charter. And we must support and defend, protect this charter with democratic means.
The right of Nicaragua to live in peace, as well as the right to live without foreign interference, were among the issues defended by Foreign Minister Denis Moncada during his speech at the United Nations Human Rights Council this Tuesday.
To live in peace, we have the right to respect. We have the right to peace, which we have been working so hard to build after centuries of aggression, meddling, and intervention by the United States of America and the complicit European powers, which have sought to maintain imperialist and colonial domination over our free, sovereign, and blessed Nicaragua. We come to this council to denounce the United States, as well as the European powers that are its complices, and to denounce its immoral and indecent policy of aggressive, arbitrary, illegal, coercive, and unilateral measures that violate all the instruments of international law.
The Bicentennial Congress of the Peoples of the World continues in Venezuela, with more than 10 working groups sessioning this Tuesday. 600 national and foreign delegates and guests are taking part in the roundtables focusing on the consequences that neoliberal policies and coercive measures imposed by the United States have on the peoples of the Global South. Former Colombian Senator Piedad Córdoba proposed to carry out an international campaign against the Iván Duque government in the wake of the ongoing violence and protests in Colombia, and in support of social equality.
Of the fascist beast against the likes of Guaidó, against the likes of Leopoldo López, who only seeks to end freedom and only seeks to sell the sovereignty of the people. Therefore, the Communist Party of Spain reiterates all his support to Venezuela, all our support to the people of the region, and above all, we want to emphasize, and as it is already being said here, we reiterate the same support for the organizations that fight against the fascist beast, that neocolonial beast against neoliberal policies. Long life Venezuela.
Welcome. Good morning. Thank you very much, Julio. Thank you very much to all the international delegates who have come to our country to participate in this event, undoubtedly in a very complex context. And on our part, the first thing we must do is to express our gratitude for coming to Venezuela at a time of immense difficulties, of many complexities. We know that, especially in Europe, the Venezuelan issue is not very easy.
In Colombia, a young man died after being hit in the chest by a tear gas canister fired by police during a protest on Monday. According to the alternative media outlet Colombia Informa, Jaime Fandiño was part of protests in Usme, a community in the Colombian capital, Bogotá. The 33-year-old protester died at a medical center he was taken to due to chest wounds. Police roadblocks had prevented rescuers from promptly taking the victim to a hospital. The human rights organization Lazos de Dignidad denounced that in Usme alone, some 10 people have sustained eye injuries out of 75 wounded by police since the beginning of the national strike on April 28th. Not only protesters suffer police brutality in Colombia, but also those helping the victims. This is the testimony of members of a medical aid brigade in Usme.
Stage of mobilization since it started at 6 in the morning, we have had to attend to many serious injuries for intoxications by tear gas. Also, as the medical mission and human rights defenders, we have been ourselves victims of physical and verbal aggressions by the public force and the anti-riot squadron.
Today, we have taken care of approximately 65 people who had been injured by gas canisters, paintballs, and stun guns. We also now regret to learn that a person had lost his life shortly after receiving first aid from us for a wound in his chest, hit by a tear gas canister.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. Argentina said Tuesday it had reached an agreement with the Paris Club of creditor countries to avoid defaulting on a loan repayment in July, while unlocking temporary relief of some $2 billion. The current government of Alberto Fernandez has been working to renegotiate the huge debt with the International Monetary Fund, inherited from the previous administration of Mauricio Macri.
March 31st, 2022, instead of paying the approximately $2.4 billion that have been scheduled, Argentina will make a payment of a series of payments totaling approximately $430 million, which implies a financial relief for Argentina of $2 billion. Argentina will have time until March 31st, 2022 to resolve to aim for a more permanent restructuring plan with the Paris Club. Argentina will continue to make efforts to reach an understanding with the International Monetary Fund that would allow us to refinance the $45 billion debt stock. Paying that amount would have been a blow to our international reserves and therefore would have generated more exchange rate instability and more macroeconomic instability in general.
In Brazil's capital, Brasilia, police forces repress indigenous demonstrators protesting against Bill 490, which threatens their land rights. About 100 indigenous people were confronted by the Brazilian police this Tuesday as they rallied at the gates of the National Congress. The Missionary Council for Indigenous Peoples stressed that the demonstrators intended to participate in a parliamentary session on the bill, which will limit recognition of reservation lands, thus further accelerating the increasingly widespread process of invasions of indigenous lands for private use, including farming, mining, and deforestation of the Amazon. The police violently prevented their entry to the Congress using tear gas to disperse the protests. The Cuban-developed COVID-19 vaccine candidate named Abdallah has shown over 92% efficacy in clinical trials. 3 doses of Abdallah have been administered in the trials, which have included hundreds of thousands of Cubans, to show 92.28% efficacy. This surpasses several of the vaccines being used globally against the coronavirus, and comes despite the immense limitations to which the country is subjected due to the U.S. blockade and sanctions. Over the weekend, it was also announced that Cuba's Soberana 2 vaccine candidate shows 62% efficacy with 2 of the 3 doses in trials, with a 3rd dose, the Soberana Plus, expected to further boost this efficacy. The highly anticipated news means Cuba is one step closer to authorizing its vaccine candidates for mass emergency use. And Chile has begun vaccinating young people between the ages of 12 and 17 years old, as the country seeks to beat back the latest wave of infections. Authorities recently announced a lockdown in the capital Santiago amid rising COVID-19 cases, despite nearly 60% of the country being fully vaccinated. Health officials warned that intensive care beds are nearing full capacity. Critics have accused the government of getting caught up in triumphalism over the vaccine rollout and of having loosened coronavirus restrictions too fast in order to kickstart the faltering economy, immersed in a deep crisis. Mexico is set to donate vaccines against the coronavirus to 5 countries in the Latin American region, based on its policy of solidarity. The move was announced by Foreign Secretary Marcelo Ebrard on Tuesday, who stressed that the government is in a position to help other nations. He pointed out that the AstraZeneca vaccine produced in collaboration with Argentina will help to protect the populations of Latin America. Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago will receive the Mexican vaccine donations in the coming days. Other nations, such as Belize, Bolivia, and Paraguay, have already received doses that Mexico donated to help advance in their vaccination process. And Brazil received this Tuesday a first batch of 1.5 million doses of the single-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine against COVID-19. The shipment comes as the population mobilizes and to demand vaccines, while the health minister and over a dozen other officials face formal investigations for negligence in confronting the pandemic.
En congruencia con su planteamiento.
Doses this year. This vaccine has the advantage of being a single dose, so we can advance in our immunization program. I remind you that we have already reached the goal of 40% of vaccinated Brazilian adults. This corresponds to 60 million Brazilians immunized with the first dose of the vaccine.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back from the South. As part of its sanctions against Iran, the United States government has now seized control of the websites of the 2 Iranian state media outlets, Press TV and Al-Alam. Each site displays a single page with a statement that it has been seized by the United States government and making reference to the U.S. sanctions laws accompanied by the seal of the FBI and the U.S. Department of Commerce. Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting, the parent of Al-Alam, reports that other sites, including a Palestinian-directed broadcast, an Arabic-language religious and cultural channel, were also seized. The media corporation accuses the United States of repressing freedom of expression and also joining forces with Israel and Saudi Arabia to block pro-resistant media outlets exposing the crimes of U.S. allies in the region. According to the United Nations Special Envoy to Afghanistan, Taliban insurgents have captured more than 50 of the country's 370 districts since May, as peace continues to appear a long way off. Special Envoy Deborah Lyons claimed that the announcement earlier this year that foreign troops will finally withdraw from Afghanistan sent a tremor through the country. She warned that increased conflict pose a risk of insecurity to many other nations. After 20 years of foreign interference and war, the United States has started to withdraw its remaining 2,500 troops from Afghanistan and aims to be completely out of the country by the symbolic date of September 11th. The Belarusian government considers new Western sanctions a declaration of economic war. In a foreign ministry statement, Minsk said the sanctions will negatively impact the interests of its citizens and warned that it will be forced to take reciprocal measures. In a ministerial meeting in Luxembourg, the European Union approved on Monday a battery of economic and financial measures against the Belarusian economy. The move had been coordinated with the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, the EU's Foreign Representative Joseph Borrell said. The United States Senate is scheduled to vote Tuesday on whether to advance the Democrats' sweeping election overhaul legislation. Republicans have united against the bill and are expected to sink it. Democratic senators argue the legislation is necessary to counter state-level efforts launched by Republicans that could make it more difficult to vote and further disenfranchise sectors already facing voter suppression, such as Black Americans. The proposed legislation will expand voter registration options along with vote by mail and early voting options. It also seeks to tackle campaign finance concerns by requiring additional disclosures of fundraising. And to celebrate the 100 years of the Communist Party of China and the South African Communist Party, the Chinese Embassy in South Africa held a webinar with the African National Congress and other stakeholders. Our collaborator, Stephen Taylor, brings us the details in the following report from Cape Town.
The Chinese Communist Party celebrates 100 years of existence this year, having been formed on the 1st of July 1921. The CPC held its first Congress back on the 23rd of July 1921. The CPC is currently led by the General Secretary Xi Jinping, who also serves as the President of the People's Republic of China. South Africa has strong ties with China, with the SACP, South African Communist Party, being formed in the same month as the CPC back in 1921, therefore sharing the 100-year celebration together. China and South Africa are also part of BRICS, along with Russia, India, and Brazil. Former President of South Africa, Kgalema Motlanthe, has this to say about the CPC.
The Communist Party of China proved to be the most consistent in the struggle to attain national independence and to pursue profound changes in social and economic life. It is always easy for an organization to proclaim itself the vanguard, but much effort and selflessness is required from a party to make the working class itself to recognize it as their own true vanguard and leader.
China is represented in South Africa by its ambassador, Chen Zhizhong, who thanked those who recently took part in the celebration of the CPC and spoke about the relationship between China and South Africa.
Although our countries are continents apart, although we have a very different history there is much what we can learn from each side. I'm also impressed by His Excellency President Motlante's remarks that the CPC has been able to develop a system that allows it to select the most competent, experienced, and educated officials for leadership positions where it matters most.
For TeleSUR News in Cape Town, I'm Stephen Taylor.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.